All right, everybody, welcome to episode 200 of the SEO Vault. Today it's going to be myself as always, and we've got Alex Barr here today. Alex, how you doing?
Doing well. Thank you, sir, for having me on.
For sure, for sure. So, we're going to be discussing a bunch of different topics as usual. So, at the SEO Vault, we discuss the latest news about the SEO industry, any movements that we think are important, and just in general, all of the latest workings that we've got across our brands. So, if you haven't already, definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel or just make sure you're connected with one of our different platforms that we upload these videos to. We're also on SEOvolt.com if you want to check out our full backlog of videos. Obviously, we have 200 put together, so there's a lot of different things for you guys to look across our brand. So before we get into things, just quickly, we're going to discuss some brand updates from Web20 Ranker. We've got new blog posts going out every week. Tons and tons of value being shared through those. So if you're not looking out for those yet, definitely check out our blog on Web20 Ranker's website. We're making updates to the local client takeover, our course that's on there. So the SEO 3.0 course. That should be it for updates today. All right, so Alex, you are from
Yes,
Growth
sir.
Foundry. Now, for
Yes.
anybody who doesn't know, can you give us a really quick rundown of what that agency is?
GrowthFoundry is a client-facing agency that helps specifically with local SEO. So we help businesses across the board, but specialize in the contractor space in order to increase visibility, specifically on Google Maps. And that also includes organic SEO.
Sweet, sweet. Okay, Growth Foundry. A lot of you guys might have already heard about Growth Foundry if you're following our stuff on Web20 Ranker. Now, I guess to give us some proper context, are you able to tell us how did you get started with the SEO industry?
I kind of started in a weird way. I started off as a logo designer. I was doing graphic design and then fell into web design. I was building all these websites and for all these clients, and they're like, well, why can't my clients find them, or customers or whatever? And I was like, okay, well, I need to figure that out. So I went down that journey of figuring out SEO because there was demand in my web design firm. So that's how I jumped into SEO. Was it was not something that I was specifically looking for, but there was demand there, and so that's why I jumped into it. And
Okay,
that was back in the early 2000s. So
I was gonna
I've been in it
say,
for a minute.
yeah, you've been in the industry for a while. So
Yeah,
was that your agency that you started, or was it like you were working for somebody else that needed your help?
that was my web design agency that I started.
Nice, nice. So, okay, yeah, I started with the content side, so that's cool that you started from the creative side. Did you have any like projects that you started as far as like any creative websites or anything that you're ranking on your own?
Back then or now?
I guess now, but also back then, like, was that a big like? How did you really grasp the understanding that you have nowadays? How did you kind of start that journey?
I started that journey in a way that I would not suggest anybody start that journey using other clients' money and time. Because it's not professional, it's not great. But knowing what I know now, looking back, it's a whole different story. At the time, I didn't know what I didn't know, and so realistically, I had people that came to me and said, "I need this to happen," and I was like, "All right, let's make this happen." And really, I just dove in depth into the SEO industry and into forums at the time. That was the big thing, and purchased a lot of different products that were BS, and really had to just sift through what worked and what didn't. Realize that testing is really the only truth, and that's why I like SEO Vault, because realistically, anybody can say anything on the internet, but without tests to back it and data to support your claims, it's really all just fluff. And so the reality of it is I built out a lot of different, single variable tests and learned a lot and was able to kind of filter the industry a lot better, knowing that I had testing that validated or invalidated someone's claims. And so that really sped up my ability to get results for clients a lot faster than a lot of people that have been in the industry the same amount of time or less than I have,
Right.
or even more for that matter. And that's why I am where I am today. I can attribute that 100% to testing.
Yeah, so how did you end up, I guess, coming across the same circles that we're at today? Like, how did you end up at GrowthFoundry?
Kind of a crazy story. Long story short is, since I've been in the industry so long, it turns into a lot smaller group of poor people than you realize. And so, between conferences and forums and Facebook groups and whatnot, speaking engagements, I've met a lot of awesome people, and so through events and a series of different companies, I've been able to go ahead and connect with GrowthFoundry and GrowthFoundry's owner, and been able to jump over there and start helping them with some of the stuff that I was doing in my own agency after I sold it. So
Very cool. So I think I'm trying to think. You have, I guess growth. So I wanted to talk about. Did you have while you were working across all these clients? Did you say that contracting is especially the type of client that you have most experience with, or the type of niche rather?
GrowthFoundry works primarily with that's probably the largest amass of niche that or industry, I guess, that we work with is contractors and any type of contractor in that area. However, we do have clients in a lot of other major fields like legal and whatnot. But I would say the far majority of our clientele is contractors.
That's very cool. So I know, yeah, I know a lot of people, ask the question of, is it, so I want to ask your opinion. Do you think it's best for people that are starting out their journey to niche down or to kind of stay broad? I kind of want to hear your end of things as far as the benefits of, I guess, not being super niche down. Because a lot of times we talk about that and we talk about how much easier it can be to have a good process for one niche, but I'm wondering how you handle all the different aspects of the different niches across the home services.
So in a lot of ways, we are niche down, right?
Okay.
So we have very specific outlines and processes and procedures and audits and ways that we do things for each niche. But the reason that it looks like we're a general agency is because we have all of that niche down for a bunch of different niches, right? And
Mm,
so we have a lot to offer to a lot of different niches. And that's all just because of extenuated like time in the industry
right.
and experience. So we have a lot of data from, tens of thousands of campaigns. And so across tons of different niches. And so we were able to build that out in mass across a lot of different niches. And that's something that someone just starting out just doesn't have access to. And so I
Right.
wouldn't suggest for someone starting out because they're just in a different starting place than we are at Growth Foundry because we have that available to us and we've utilized that. For someone just starting out, I highly suggest doing one of two ways. And this isn't super popular, but everybody talks about niching down to a specific industry or sub niche, right? Which is, I completely agree with because that allows you to be very, very specific in not only your targeting, but also your content and your plan and what you're offering and your vernacular and everything else. The other way that I suggest going, and this is kind of controversial, is instead of being niche specific, being location specific. If you
Hmm.
can dominate in an area and regardless of clientele, right? So then you're not being niche specific. You're not just dealing with plumbers as an example and chiropractors, right? Like everybody talks about. You're dealing with, everybody in Denver, Colorado, right? And so if you niche down to a specific area, you can do a lot more when it comes to dominating the visibility and the coverage in that area. And you can be super hyper locally relevant. That works out really, really well, but not a lot of people talk about.
Right, because yeah, a lot of people, and I mean, with the SEO process, we do look at, all the different sides, but I guess a lot of times people can get a little bit too concentrated on one thing. So that's a lot of advice that you just kind of fired off there. So I'm kind of like going through it in my head. So another way to niche down per se. So if you're just starting out and you're trying to get a good, or you're trying to create good results, and you're trying to also have a good sales process in place. So that's a good idea. Instead of going niche specific, go location specific.
Yeah.
Right. Because the SEO campaigns, I mean, we do that too. It's either niche specific or geo specific for a lot of the different signals we build. So I guess that's just taking a little bit more from that idea, but using it for your prospecting. And then I wanted to ask that, or I asked that because I know, like, especially myself, I'll niche down with my own personal agency because it's easier. Because I have so many things
Yeah.
going on, it's very easy
Less
for me
irons
to
in the
do that.
fire.
Right. So that's a great point that you brought up where if you're in a place like Growth Foundry, because you guys have some pretty seasoned SEO veterans, I guess you could say. So at that point, I mean, you've had so many years to build all the separate verticals. So that's a great thing to kind of keep in mind, I guess, for somebody that's building their agency. Because if you are going to go all out for any niche, uh, just be mindful that to get a really good process and to actually have results across each of those, you might need to spend a lot more time on the preparation side before just kind of starting things up. So that's a great
Well, the
point
age
there.
old saying of if you got 2 hours to chop down a tree, you spend the first hour sharpening your axe. I mean that's 100% applicable to SEO as well. The more time you spend in your process procedure, your research, and your planning stage, and you have everything clearly defined, and you have that roadmap, then the actual implementation is way easier, and the results that you're going to be receiving at the end of the day are expected, not a surprise.
Yeah, it's not like we hope it's gonna go well. So, all right, from your time at Growth Foundry, or really any SEO job you've had in the past, well, no, I guess I want to focus on what's more relevant now. From your experience at Growth Foundry, what do you think is the biggest? Actually, it's not a great question. From your experience across SEO, what do you think is the biggest mistake that other marketers are doing? So I guess another way to say it is when you take on new clients at Growth Foundry, what are these big mistakes that you're finding? Because I know, like myself, I'll find a ton of different structural mistakes with the website side. A lot of times people are just so focused on the GBP that they forget other things. But I'm curious to hear like what you're seeing on your end from the niches that you work on.
Well, I want to back that up just one for 1 second because it's two different approaches, right? So from marketers in general, I think it needs to come back to testing, right? And they need to lean on people that are either doing testing or start doing their own testing. Because that's the biggest issue with marketers that I see is that they're taking stuff that they see online as gospel and then implementing it into client campaigns. That's an issue, right? From our side, because we work with individual business owners, um, from that side, a lot of what we're seeing wrong with their businesses from an online presence perspective is that whoever their agency was before, or if they were trying to do it themselves, or their nephew was, you know, in a Facebook group for SEO or whatever the case may be, the biggest issue I see there is too much focus in one area, right? So they might have like killer freaking on page optimization, but the URL structure is just a mess, right? As an example. So they're really just they're focusing too much attention on one thing, and SEO is has many variables, right? And you need to make sure that across the board that you're doing well, and that the time that you take to go ahead and audit all of that and evaluate and prioritize is a lot more important. And that's really what is going to differentiate you in the SERPs rather than having like the perfect percentage of on page, as an example.
Right. Yeah, and at least from what I've seen, it's like it's always with good intentions, I guess, or at least most of the times, it's
Right.
with good intentions that you'll build out a very thorough process. Let's say for on page, let's say you have a killer process where you get pretty much every point of data that you could think of into the strategy that actually ends up being implemented on the writing. But if it took you so long to do that, or if it took your SEOs, way too long to do that, it's like if you end up doing all in on one thing, you might be lacking on backlinks, or you might be lacking on like the auditing process, or a bunch of other foundational pieces. And I do
It's
see
just one
that.
of those things where, from a holistic perspective, there's not a lot of people looking at it because everybody has specialized down so much. So a
Yeah,
lot of these agencies that we have clients coming from specialize in like one particular service, right? And so they're like, oh, hey, we did this one thing really well, and like everything else was maybe like we might not even touched it. And so that's one of the things that GrowthFoundry brings to the table is we're able to look at everything holistically, point out all of it, build out a roadmap, and then be able to implement that roadmap. And that's something that I think a lot more, not only individual businesses should be looking for in an agency, but individual agencies and marketers need to start addressing, because it's not an all-in-one full stack situation that I'm talking about. But I'm just talking about a holistic approach, taking all the variables into account instead of, keeping blinders on to certain things.
yeah, especially when you're thinking about building your process, because like when you build a process, I guess once it's done, you're happy with it. You kind of set it loose. So if you have the holistic perspective when you're planning it out, then that just means, okay, worry about all the different things and try to combine something that addresses all of them at once. Versus, I guess, what people like to call like the 80-20 rule, which in many situations, sure, that, the 80-20 thing makes a lot of sense, especially from like a leader perspective, like a CEO perspective. But on the fulfillment side, at least with SEO, that's not really how it'll always play out. Or rather, like that thought will lead you towards those situations where your agency is good at one thing and one thing only, or they're
Well, the
spending too
problem
much
is the
time.
80-20 rule applies to a single variable, right? So like a lot of people are like, okay, 80% of my clients produce 20% of my income. Like that's the biggest relation that people use the 80-20 rule to, right? And they're like, okay, cool. If I fire 80% of my clients, I just focus on 20%, I'm still making 80% of income. That's a single variable. When you apply 80-20, it falls apart to SEO because everything's interconnected and it's a giant domino situation on a spider web, is kind of how you're looking at it. So if you knock one domino on one vertices of the spider web, it's going to affect the domino on the other side of the spider web. And everything's interconnected. So if you have, lacking areas on one part of the spider web, the other part of the spider web is going to sag, is essentially how SEO works. And so that's why looking at it holistically, making the entire structure solid, gets you the results that you need.
For sure, for sure. And now to kind of wrap up the segment here, I want to ask you now, what's the favorite thing you've done? What's the favorite thing you've changed or accomplished? Either at Growth Foundry or really anything SEO related you've done.
My favorite thing in SEO that I've done.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I mean, I've done a lot of cool stuff. What's the favorite? Put me on the spot over
Yeah,
here.
so
Is there a specific topic? Like
I'll give
favorite
you
thing,
I'll
or
give you
just
a specific topic. Yeah. So a lot of people might not know you've had different roles within an SEO agency. You can do not only
yes?
stuff on the fulfillment but client sided things. So let me ask you something specific there. What kind of changes have you made for, like, let's say a client sided the client side to an agency that you think has been very valuable or very like pivotal, I guess.
I would say the most pivotal, and this is applicable to anybody else out there with an agency, is on the client side. Something that's looked over is expectations through education, right? And a
Mm,
lot of the times we don't frame the expectations well enough because we're not educating the client to the point for them to understand that expectation and the weight or uh, perspective that you're coming from on the agency side, right? So with education, without framing expectation, is something that they're going to get anywhere else. But if you're framing expectation of delivery, of results, of working with them on something, then and then educating as to why and how everything works, then not only are you going to have a lot smoother process, but you're going to gain their trust and authority in doing that. And it's a better overall client experience. It increases retention rates, it decreases churn. That's probably the biggest thing that I could suggest
That's
there, and that's something I'm really proud of.
That's a great point, and I want to touch upon that just for a second because, so basically, being able to present not just a bunch of facts, but maybe doing it in a more meaningful way that helps to kind of bridge the gap. So, am I getting this right? Basically, bridge the gap between here's what your fulfillment is doing, here's why we're doing it, here's how it's supposed to benefit your campaign. So now
Correct.
there's a lot that okay, cool. So there's a lot that goes on with that, but that also requires that your client-facing staff have a certain amount of like knowledge about SEO. So as a
Correct.
follow-up, how smart do you think client success needs to be? Because I know from your side, you definitely have the capabilities of, being client facing while still having all the knowledge from fulfillment. So I'm wondering
Right.
what your opinion is on that for somebody who's building an agency.
So, in all of my agencies, whether it was my graphic design agency, logo design agency, web design agency, or my lead gen agency, everything that I've had in the past, everybody that I brought in, whether it's a VA or a colleague or a partner, what the biggest thing that I've done successfully is make sure that we're on the same page in regards to process and in regards to how we're addressing what works, right? So bringing your team up to speed, whether that be your sales guy, your account manager, your VA, whatever, on at least a base knowledge of, hey, here's how Google works, here's how the algorithm works, here's patents, here's, what you're looking for in a SERP, etc. And having some like base vernacular, a base vocabulary, glossary that you can go ahead and acquaint your clientele with as well. So everybody has that base level to work off of, makes life so much easier. And that's
That's a
something
good
that,
one there. The glossary can be used for client success for the client and can be collaborated on. If you do like a doc, you can comment and tag the SEO tech. Hey, clarify this, please.
well, and that's another thing too, that in regards to all the way through the client experience, right? So not only in sales, but in, oh, excuse me, in fulfillment, I'm trying to get rid of this stage here. I apologize, but not only in sales but also in fulfillment and throughout the client process with your account manager. If the same verbiage is used, then that also helps with not having confusion and making sure that interdepartment things are clear when you're communicating. So that alone across the board is beneficial, regardless of department and regardless of what part of the agency that you're in, whether you're a client or you're internal.
That's a great point because using if so, like a lot of times when I would discuss things about link building, at least from a just from like a theoretical perspective, really broad level, I like to call it different things like mentions I'll use different words, right? And I guess that's really important as far as the glossary. I think that's actually a huge tip. I think that's something that probably every agency should have because if I'm calling it one thing and the new client success member that just joined is hearing different things, they're lost. Like you just lost
Right.
them, and they might not be super tech savvy, so like you're kind of screwed there. And then if
Or
they're
then even worse, especially with like clients, especially clients that have tried to DIY first before they come on board, they might have read certain vernacular in a forum or online or an article or whatever, and they assume that it means one thing when the reality of it is it means something different. So
and now all of
again,
a sudden,
reframing that expectation through education fixes that.
yeah, and then all of a sudden it's like if you can't differentiate or if at the client level, so all the way from fulfillment, if at the client level you can't differentiate something between let's say a PBN link and your very expensive guest blog post that you're very carefully placing, you're kind of screwed because like think about that experience now, or now think about also the growth of your agency. You're supposed to have clients that understand the value that you're delivering, because for one, I guess it's the reasoning behind why they're paying you for so much. Two, if you ever wish to upsell them, or if you ever expand the campaign and wish to increase the pricing, you'll never be able to if there's that type of disorganization in your agency. It's something so small, but you can see all of a sudden now at an agency level, you can really set yourself up for failure if you don't have something like this. So that's a great, thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great one. And a lot of times, like, we're all so busy in the middle of weeds of things. It can be, some of these things, if you just don't take care of it, you forget about it. Like, oof. So thank you for sharing your experiences there. GrowthFoundry, anybody that, needs an agency at that type of level where client-facing staff, actually know everything and are very in tune with fulfillment, that would be a great place for you to speak with. So, all right, let's shift things up a little bit. So I want to quickly introduce some testing that we're doing. I also want to get your opinion, so feel free to butt in whenever you want to. And then after that, we'll go over a few different news points. I know you also had a big new news update that you wanted to share also. But if anybody is not aware, we are doing testing right now on CTR manipulation. So our team lead on the GBP side, Lasha, is leading tests regarding a lot of the typical ways you might find other marketers using CTR manipulation. Now we started like in the past few weeks pretty simple, just a few simulated clicks every day, and nothing too crazy as far as strategy, but we're already seeing a lot of things that we want to talk about, and we've gone ahead and shared that through the updates, the SEO Mad Scientist updates. So check out that newsletter if you want to follow along with us. We're being very careful to try to isolate the different factors in play to try to get a good look at what CTR manipulation does. So super quick update. We did see some small gains. I would think very reasonable. I think gains, nothing crazy, but we did see gains on the map side for the two different listings that we were testing. And the update as far as last time is that we were able to maintain those rankings. I also went through and I dug deep as far as any new links that maybe showed up, any new other signals, any new reviews, and I was able to confirm nothing else is in play so far. So the next step is obviously ramping it up. We are going to explore different queries to send the traffic to afterwards, but first, let's just go along the thoughts of one of the obvious first things we wanted to do is just ramp up the amount of traffic and see what that does. So make sure to check out that SEO Mad Scientist newsletter if you want to stay up to date with those. Another update.
I have one question for you.
Yes.
Anybody that's watching that's interested in CTR manipulation or implementing that in campaigns, at what point is there a negative side of CTR manipulation in regards to having to keep it going, or is there a negative to dropping it off in your testing, or does that cover that?
We have not yet dropped it off. That's a great point. So I will speak to Lasha, and if anybody has any feedback like that, feel free to send it our way. If not through the comment section on the video, you can always make your way over to one of our websites like web20ranker.com and shoot us a message through the chat there. We do have a live support. But that's a great question there, because that is another obvious thing as far as what happens when I stop the fake traffic. I guess my untested thoughts are, probably will drop off in my opinion, but we'll have to test that and really see how it looks, because that's the other thing. I like looking at the geogrids and actually seeing how it plays out, not just kind of giving a broad update. But, okay, next thing from Web20 Ranker, the next blog post. So this is going to be a really, really good one. And I feel bad for not having dug this deep yet into all the work that Mark's put together. I'm going to do that right after this. But Mark has put together information across more than 4,000 GBP campaigns. These are campaigns that have come through Web20 Ranker at some point in time. We've gone through, everything and done some pretty deep analysis with some smart, code But Mark is ready to release an updated SEO pricing calculator. If you've ever used the one on our website, it was a pretty old one. It was pretty basic. It did use many factors, but they were very simple. So this is actually something huge as far as being able to quickly get some type of a pricing for your campaign. So I know a lot of people ask me about pricing.
An accurate pricing, right? Because it got so deep and it's so specific.
So if you think about it, I guess without revealing too much, because I do want you to go and read that blog post on our website, but we're taking into account, so like a lot of other people, they might have a calculator that, let's say, pulls the city or something like that and tries to grab population. But another challenging part to it is population density. So I've seen a lot of tools essentially break or not work or just not be accurate at all because of that lack of attention to the actual density from one point to another on the map. Because of course, if you look at any given city, it's not a flat line as far as like how many people are everywhere. It varies a lot, and that definitely affects the rankings, or rather, it plays into the competition level of the map's rankings. So take a look at that. It will be out by the time this video is out, but it's taken us a long time to put together this information, so you're definitely going to want to check that out. All right, let's go into the news here, and I do have a bunch of topics picked out for you guys as usual, but Alex told me right before this he actually has something he wanted to bring up. Alex, can you tell us what we're seeing that's very fresh here on the ever-changing platform that is Google search?
So something that you may have already seen is a new filter, and it's called the perspective filter, and it's changing how not only traffic is driven in Google search, but also how we're thinking about content and what we're optimizing for. And so the Google perspective filter takes a lot of different things into account, puts it in kind of one basket, and it gives us as an SEO a completely new opportunity to rank, which otherwise wasn't available. And so this is something that we're starting to see. We announced it a little over a month and a half ago. And we're starting to see it being rolled out into the wild. And so as time goes on, and by the time this is released, we're probably going to see it even more prevalently. And therefore, it's something that we should take not only advantage of, but into account, because it does affect everything that we're doing online. And it is now part of the SERP.
Wow. Okay, so I'm looking at it right now. So it looks like a little bit of a layout change for search. So this is definitely something you guys are going to want to check out, from the time here moving forward. But any sort of shifts here on the platform, such as layout shifts, like what Alex said, it could mean a shakeup in SERP, sure, but it could also mean new places for you to be getting your businesses out in front of people. So I'm already thinking images, right? So like even just thinking basics, like images and videos. I've definitely had clients like come to me and they're like, yeah, I don't want to do YouTube. I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to take too many pictures. So I can already think probably, these types of clients, you'll probably want to start talking to them about having a bigger brand, having more involvement on the platform. What else do you think, Alex, we should take away from these changes as they start rolling out?
Well, I'm going to give a perspective from two sides, right? So from the agency side, this allows you to acquire more of the client's budget, right? Because you're expanding beyond just normal SERP, right? So this SERP now includes more than just links. So like Victor was saying, it includes pictures, it includes video. So more of that content heavy, which you can do a lot of other things with from a marketing perspective. So expand your horizon there, offer more to your clients, and you're also going to be able to not only acquire more of the marketing budget, but also help them in a lot more ways and gain more visibility and traction, increase their bottom line from that perspective. From a client perspective, this is really important because from a visibility perspective, you now have this new opportunity, right? And so being able to take existing assets that you may have already created for other platforms or social or what have you, and repurposing and reutilizing that in order to gain more visibility, more customers is a huge opportunity without having to, completely change marketing strategies. So that's something that if you haven't already, is something that you should talk to your agency that you're working with about and inquire and see if they're on top of it and they know what this is. If not, maybe start looking at a different agency. We'd love to talk to you at GrowthFoundry. And if not, and they already know what they're doing, what are they doing in order to make that happen and have your content show up there?
Right, as an agency, this is kind of like, I guess if it plays out the way Google likes and their users like it, the business owners and marketers buy into it and actually start publishing more across more platforms. If that happens, I can certainly, at least in my opinion, think, hey, look, your brand has to be more expansive to actually compete. And that's already pretty much what we're seeing nowadays, anyways. So it's like if you're not at an agency level expanding across just like typical SEO, like on page, off page GBP work, and that's it, definitely start expanding now. That's definitely something I tell people that come to me that are like new agency owners who will ask me about my thoughts, because a lot of times people will be just focused on the GBP side and creating signals for it. And I tell them, look, you got to expand your reach at some point. One, like you said, your clients are going to need it, and they're going to leave you if you can't be their provider. Two, I already lost my thought. Two, you're going to get left behind in the SERPs. Eventually, you're going to get left behind. You're going to go up against competition level where you actually need to produce all these extra properties and have traffic or signals going to them. And at that point, you're just going to be left in the dust. Sorry. That was the other point I was thinking of. Being able to charge more. You can only charge so much for just like GBP work. So definitely looking forward to the future, just expanding what you do, even just at a personal level. It's always keeping us challenged as far as what we're doing. Okay, let me switch to a few other news points here. So, a few things that we thought were important. So, I did see, this one's all right. AI content not well received. Okay, this was a good comment. And this is important, I think, ongoing as marketers use AI more so to keep a good grasp of how Google kind of wants us to use it. I think across the board, if you have an eye on quality right, you're probably doing it right. But I guess from Danny Sullivan, Google Search's liaison, he actually responded to a claim from Vox Media saying that AI content, Vox Media said that their AI content is well received by search engines. And I guess they probably said it in a bit too of a broad way, because although it might have been good for their domain and the way that they rolled it out, Danny Sullivan here said it's still not correct that AI content will be well received by search engines, at least for us. So what do you think that means, Alex? I think it's just still on par as far as if you're thinking about quality, it's a different thing than just simply using AI content.
Well, I think AI content's a really broad term right now, right? Because with AI specifically, it's all prompt generation as to what kind of quality that content that it generates, and therefore it comes back to knowing the testing and knowing the data in order to build a prompt that generates AI content that is valuable. So generically created, data lacking prompts are going to be completely different than, well-researched prompts that have clearly defined boundaries in regards to the result that they're going to produce. And therefore, I think generally overall, people are thinking that AI content means that we're skipping that step of preparation and we'll just let AI do that. And I think he's speaking more directly towards those people in regards to saying that's not really a blanket statement we should be putting out there.
Just curious, your opinion. Should people be firing their writers?
No, They should be educating their writers and turning them into prompt engineers
That's a great
and
way to put
focusing on
it.
that data.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I saw in the news there's still a lot going on with like their whole writer's strike, and a lot of it is really because of AI, and the way that I guess corporations roll out its implementation. But that's a
Well, I think the
great point
same
from the
thing with
SEO side.
AI. I think the same thing with AI is happening that happened back in the day with like calculators or cell phones or whatever, right? It's just a tool. At the end of the day, like AI is not it's not the Terminator, right? It's not taking over whatever. It's a tool. So you either learn how to use the tool and adapt to the situation, or if all you knew how to do was exactly what the tool is doing and you don't have any higher level skills, then yes, that's when it will replace your job. But being able to utilize the tool to better your job is really what I think AI does well and is what we should be focusing on in regards to AI.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, next point here. We've got something that. So you had actually brought this up right before this. So we have some clarification from Google as far as the structure for your URLs. Now, this one's more important for anybody doing different languages. And I've definitely come across this before and kind of seen a whole bunch of funky special characters in the URL. So so it looks like we finally have some specifics as far as what is the proper way to do it and what is not. I guess to put it in layman's term, it looks like none of the. So if you have like in Spanish, you have the squiggly line over the N. So no, don't put that in there. You have to put the UTF-8 like specification for it, which does I guess it can have a like percentage signs and some other signs in there. But I'm wondering how do you handle any websites that need URLs like this?
So realistically, we're talking about slugs here.
Yeah.
So in regards to slugs, it's irrelevant, right? And Google's saying that you want English specific slugs, regardless of the language of the page. And that's because of how their algorithm is crawling it, right? And so that's really what that comes down to. The most interesting thing in that article that I thought um, stood out to me was the use of emojis.
Oh, yeah, I saw
And
that.
so they're saying do not use emojis in your URL slugs. And that's something that people have been implementing into the headlines of their H1 tags and their titles of their articles and whatnot with emojis to stand out in the SERPs. However, if you're implementing that into the slug and structure of the actual website, that is a no-go, is what Google is saying. And I assume that's because they're having a hard time crawling that and associating that with anything.
Yeah, it's probably much more organized without all the funkiness in the mix. So yeah,
Right.
if you're building a website that's just gonna grab the H1 and set it as the URL, be very careful with your use of emojis, because at least for now, finally we have actual statement from Google saying that that's not the right way to do it. So yeah, I hope nobody out there is doing funkiness like that. But all right, so I wanted to ask you also because I like asking anybody else that has another pool of clients to manage. But Google expect a Google Google algorithm update this summer. So there's a lot of people over the last month or so that are commenting on higher, I guess the volatility tools, the metrics, the few places that put those out have seen spikes. I myself have not seen any effects of this, any sort of unusualness. I'm wondering if you have on your end at all.
We haven't seen any crazy ups or downs. Everything's been kind of within error of margin. However, we are seeing volatility in some testing and whatnot that we've been doing that's like single variable.
Okay.
And from everything that I've looked at personally, it seems to be a combination of further helpful content update and the implementation of the perspective filter and
Hmm.
search being the two different things that are really making a difference and causing waves in volatility.
That
That's just a
makes
personal opinion based on the research that I've and the data that I've gathered.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, right? Anything pertaining to anything they're talking about right now on their updates, on their advancements to their learning or their language model. I guess as they start to roll out any changes at all, that's definitely where the volatility comes from, all those crazy sudden movements. So if
Right.
anybody has a campaign they think is in the effects of this, let me know. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about that, especially as part of the SEO Mad Scientist. If you want to share any of that with us. But yeah, I'm just looking at it here so it was from John Mueller just responding to somebody on Twitter, which I guess now is X. I just clicked on it. I'm like, oh boy. Uh, so I don't know if you caught that. It's now X. It's not Twitter anymore.
Yep.
But John's somebody, as usual, is like, hey, any updates coming up? And he says, I'm sure we'll have some. Cued the countdown music. So, but it's really nothing specific being shared, right? They're always pushing out updates nowadays. But again, if you feel like you're getting caught by something that's an update, let me know. We'd love to take a look at that. Otherwise, at least from my end, everything is thankfully looking pretty good, or looking, I guess, as good as it should be. So let's see. Was there anything else you wanted to touch upon here from the list of news? I know you had some other stuff you were looking at separately over the past few weeks, but um, we have. Oh, right.
It,
Actually, I do want to share this really quick. So a lot of people, I tell a lot of people not to use on the GBP, the products section. You know how people put like services in there sometimes? I, yeah, I tell people nowadays like don't do that, especially as they keep updating their product side. You just
well,
don't make.
there was a product update recently that changed pricing, right? And
Yeah,
so
basically, I'm seeing them further and further develop that product side, and we've already seen me, Mike, across different agencies. We've seen it happen where GBPs get flagged, and then it ends up being because they stuffed that product section. But today here, I'm looking at a news article. Google search compares systems and savings from Energy Star and Energy.gov. So now, I guess it's interesting that they chose this specific to start on, but if you are looking for HVAC products like AC units, it looks like you're getting fed some nice rich data now as far as being able to make a choice on what product you want to purchase from the SERPs themselves. So check that out if you're curious as far as what they're messing with on the product side. I'm not sure if anybody, else, or if you, Alex, mess with any clients that apply for that product side. I typically don't. But again, at least from my side of views, I'm not trying to abuse that platform, seeing that they're adding so much attention to it and trying to make something valuable out of it.
it's really beneficial for clients that do have products in regards to like the e-com space. And then there's also ways to make it work for services that are product heavy, right? So specifically things like rentals and whatnot that a service based around a product, you you can do a lot of things there. So those are all things to keep in mind. I wouldn't say like blanket statement, stay away from it, but just make sure that if you are deciding to go that route, that it is relevant.
Right. And sorry, I cut you off there. Was there another news piece you wanted to add to the mix?
Um, just in regards to the volatility, is that
Sorry,
what
what
you're
was
thinking?
that?
In regards to the volatility, is that what you're thinking?
Oh,
And how that
yeah,
pertains,
I think
or
you were gonna say something about it. Yeah.
yeah. So one of the things to keep in mind, because there is some volatility, and it is confirmed that there's an algorithm update coming out as we, get closer and closer to the end of summer. So that is confirmed that it's coming. We've already seen volatility in the SERPs. We have this new perspective filter already out there, and it's being rolled out. So there's a lot of things going on right now. So specifically, if we're talking about content investing, everything that you're going to be getting back data wise, take with a grain of salt, because you're going to be seeing a lot of false positives as stuff changes and adapts. And
It's
so
never
I would
perfect
just
when they
be,
roll things out.
and oftentimes once they do roll things out, they roll things back
Yeah,
as well. So
something's gonna
if
break.
you if you're like, oh my gosh, this thing's working, this tactic from 2005 is working awesome. Like this is going to be the new update, and give it 3 weeks. And if it's still working, that's a whole different story. They often roll things back, and you get a lot of positives. You're going to see some variations in the SERPs, and that's why I said that any variations I've seen during this volatility, from a GrowthFoundry perspective, has all been within margin. And so those are things that, as an agency, you need to take into account and not build your campaign or content based off of results that you're currently seeing, because this isn't a great time to have something solid to build off of, just due to that volatility. So that was going to be my only comment to agency owners out there, is just keep things in mind, keep things, with a grain of sand in regards to building things out right now for those reasons.
That's a great point as we go through any expected volatility here in the next few month or so. But yeah, we can only get so good of a look into what's really going on. And even then, it's like we're not actually working at Google. We're not one of their engineers. Even then, not all of them understand everything at a whole. So take everything with a grain of salt. Try to compare your results, like especially before you make a big change across your agency. Compare against other people. A lot of us talk within groups. So if you're not already in the group, go over to Facebook and join Local Client Takeover. That's where we post all of our updates and blog posts, anything that anything that we have going on. That's where we post too. So head over there. Another place for you to go to is SEO Vault, obviously, to see all of our backlog of content, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That would be awesome. If you haven't already, give us a like on this video, and we'd love any feedback as usual. But before we close out here, Alex, did you have anything you want to add? For anybody, for the benefit of agency owners that are watching our show?
The benefit of agency owners that are watching the show, biggest thing that I could say from a benefit perspective is figure out how your business is from the perspective of your client, right? So figure out how your business is perceived, how it operates, how everything from the perspective of your client. Oftentimes we're too deep in the weeds, and we're internally, we know a bunch of stuff and how it's going, but we never stop and take a second and look at it from the perspective of the client. What is their client experience? What are they receiving? How is communication being dealt on their end? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, they're the ones paying the way, and we want to make sure that their experience and their perspective is prioritized, so that everything that you're doing that's awesome inside of the business, all that value is then translated to them. Because oftentimes there's a disconnect between that, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all this cool stuff, and the client's like, I haven't heard from him in 3 weeks. I don't even know if he's doing anything. And right. So making sure that you take time to address that is one of the biggest things that I think agency owners could benefit from.
I love that, and that's definitely how you build a smarter and smoother flowing agency, as far as all the different mishaps that can happen if you're not at that level. So thank you so much for joining me today. Again, if anybody wants to talk with Alex, head over to GrowthFoundry and hit them up. But again, if you want somebody that has all the knowledge on the fulfillment side and has all of these, everything we discussed already in play, you can go over to growthfoundry.com. Otherwise, thank you everybody for joining us. We will see you again next week.
Thanks again, Victor.